What's up, guys? Gun here. Happy Saturday. It's October 19th, 2019. I know. Gun, where the freak have you been? Where is your NFL videos for this week? NFL Week 7. Well, guys, it's been a really busy week. Aside from preparing for the NBA season, which, by the way, starts on Tuesday, and we have so many contests and DFS uh, money piles to cast our net on. I have to prepare for content and stuff like that, develop spreadsheets, all that good stuff, and then, guys, there's only one sport that I'm just a fan of its beauty, and I was raised by, and that's the Yankees, man, baseball. Growing up in New York, man, every year, man, Yankees are our life, dude. And I spend basically all summer long, every day. I haven't missed a Yankee game this year. I've literally watched every single Yankee game. Um, and it's just I love it. I love it. So when the Yankees make the playoffs in October, it's just a special time of year. It's a magical feeling. And I get to be a fan. I really do. You know, DFS and sports gambling, all that stuff, a lot of times can really neutralize your emotions and your love of the game. But for Yankee baseball, it's still there for me. So and I've been enjoying that. And, of course, we've been dealing with a lot of postseason baseball this week. And then the Yankees, due to a rainout, if the series goes Game 7, it could end tonight. If it goes to Game 7, it'll be 4 days in a row. So I've just been exhausted trying to juggle time, scheduling, coding for spreadsheets, trying to schedule the NBA content tree and all that good stuff. So I appreciate the fact that so many of you guys have reached out to me on Twitter. I've gotten tweets, DMs. Gun, you're gonna do a video. You guys are awesome. That means a lot to me that there's some of you cats out there that actually look forward to my spin on things, or even like the way we break stuff down. So I definitely appreciate that, and I didn't want to disappoint you guys, so I apologize for the delay. But in this video, we're gonna take a crack at NFL Week 7 with a focus on DraftKings, but of course, a lot of this information can be twisted and turned to FanDuel and Yahoo. I haven't dove too far deep, so a lot of this is going to be first look type of stuff with the full research tree that we use. So appreciate that. We're gonna talk about all 10 games, right? 10 games on the slate. Couple there's a Jalen Ramsey trade to the Rams that we might have to digest, and there's a lot of injuries and stuff that we have to keep track of. But actually, being the day before game day, we actually know a lot of information that we didn't, or we probably wouldn't know on Tuesday if I did this video Tuesday. So there are some pros and cons here. This is the week, man. NBA is back. So the VIP section at RunDFS.com is at full swing, full capacity. So we're back to NBA pricing. Hopefully all you guys that took advantage of the discount last week appreciate the discounts. But now we're back. NBA's back. Well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? Well, for me, it means no days off. It is feet to the floor. The Discord is going to be a massive part of the research process. We have, almost 70 cats in the VIP Discord right now. And this thing is going to be popping. This weekend for football, it's going to be popping. We're going to have the voice chat tomorrow night, or tonight, excuse me, after the Yankee game. So if you guys are trying to chop up some plays with us, there's going to be college football today. These cats are chopping up. But for me personally, I have to host some voice chats here on Saturday night for football. And then every day for NBA, I try to host a 2-hour pre-log voice chat where we're hanging out, we're absorbing information, reacting to news, talking plays. And I think that is one of the biggest additions that anyone can add to their DFS repertoire of tools. Is not just stat finder, stat spitters, and optimizers, but have a team of like-minded individuals looking for information. Everyone's researching while keeping their ear to the ground, and we have instant reaction to news that comes out, and we can react accordingly. So, good times, man. It's a fun time of year, but it's a busy time of year. So because of that, because of literally 7 day workage for me, the prices for NBA go up because it includes everything. So if you guys want to lock in for the week, you get a $30 week pass, you get the $55 2 week pass, and then the $100 month pass is back. But as a way to extend a show of gratitude to some of the early birders or long timers, you guys can actually lock in the entire NBA season this week only. This week only for $350, and that'll get you the rest of NFL, the all of NBA, and the start of baseball next season. So that'll just be this week. It's a one-time or 1 week offer, and then we're shutting that down. And probably until the turn of the new year, we'll just be doing week passes, 2 week passes, and month passes, and then of course, when the new year comes, we'll have some like year pass offerings and stuff like that. So I appreciate you guys that have rode with me all summer long or to the beginning of NFL. Man, we're about to get cranked up, man. It's about to go down. So let's talk about some week 7. Like I said, it's going to be kind of it's a first look, but it's also a late look because we need to. It's so late in the week that we'll be able to make some decisions. So some stuff that I'm going to have open if you guys want to track along. I'm going to have the NFL injury report, NFL.com/injuries. I got the RunDFS.com NFL VIP spreadsheet. Of course, you guys can access this with a VIP pass at RunDFS.com. We got DraftKings open. Actually, I have it open twice, so we'll close that one. Got the NFL Vegas odds tab from Fantasy Labs. This is a free page that you guys can access. FantasyLabs.com/NFL/Vegas. I have Stat News open, and then if we have to open some more stuff throughout the research session, we can do it. No problem, right? No problem. Anyway, let's talk about this slate. 10 games. I kind of liked it from just like a first look at everything that was on it. I feel like there's a lot of games that feel easier to dismiss. And then there's some games that we can maybe deep dive into and get some value out of. We'll start, I guess, in order of DraftKings. San Francisco 49ers at the Washington Redskins. We'll pull up the Vegas tab here. The Niners have an implied total of 25.5. The Redskins are much lower. The second lowest total of the week, 15.5. So the Niners, I think they're for real, guys. I think we've got enough sample size here after 6 weeks of play to know what's real, what's not, what's fake. And I think the 49ers are real, and I think we know that the Redskins are bad. So starting with the 49ers here, even though they're on the road, you got to like their defense first and foremost. If you check out what their defense has been doing, they're the second most expensive defense on the week. But 10, 19, 7, 7, 27. This has been one of the highest floor with decent upside defenses in NFL. They are for real. I think you could have made the case the first couple weeks that maybe their strength of schedule was a little bit in their favor, but after what they were able to do against the Rams, to hold a team with Nick Chubb, who leads the team or leads the league in elusiveness, and Odell to just 3 points, and so on and so forth. I definitely like this 49ers defense. I think at 4,100, if you can get there. I get it. That's a lot to play for defense. Offensively, the 49ers really have just two people that I'm curious with this week. First of all, George Kittle, the highest priced tight end on the week. He's $6,700. The last 2 weeks he's giving you 20 plus fantasy points. The main reason why I only have two players from this Niners team that I can really be curious with offensively is because this is a very spread out offense. If we go to the RunDFS.com VIP spreadsheet, go to weekly targets, and scroll all the way down, I guess, to the San Francisco side of things, you'll see that, man, this team's target share is all over the place. And the one constant is George Kittle. He's averaging 7.4 targets per game. But past that, Debo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin, Dante Pettis, Matt Breida, Kendrick Bourne. Like, it's very spread out past the George Kittle. So I can't latch on to any pass catchers here, and I won't. So no guys like Debo, no guys like Goodwin in my pool this week. But the other name here that I might be curious with is Tevin Coleman, running back. $5,600 for him. The last 2 weeks, 16 and 18 carries. He was banged up for the first quarter of the season. First quarter of the first quarter, right? He's only played 3 games. The first week was, I guess that's the game where he kind of got shaken up. And then after that, had some time off. And week 5 and week 6, we got carries, 16 and 18. And I think what's most notable is he took all of the red zone work since he's been back. If we go to, I guess it would be a little bit. Let me sort this. I guess it would be a little bit skewed because it would include weeks that he didn't play. But if we go to Control F, Tevin Coleman. On the season, he has 27.27% of his team's red zone carries. And that's 9 carries inside the 20, 6 inside the 10. So he looks like he's the red zone guy. He looks like he's the overall carry guy, the snap guy. I know Matt Breida and guys like that are going to be lurking. But I think at 5,600, Tevin Coleman against the Redskins gives me some hope. Like, I think if I have to pull away with 2 names from the 49ers offense, it's absolutely George Kittle. And then I think it has to be Tevin Coleman as the number 2. The Redskins, by the way, 621 yards rushing allowed through 6 weeks, 4 rushing touchdowns. They also have been kind of beat up to pass catching running backs, but I do think that is the Matt Breida role, so I'm not going to use that as a token of approval for Tevin Coleman. But those are basically the 2 names I'm walking away with. Probably don't play Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just 49ers defense, George Kittle, and Tevin Coleman. Redskins side of things, I got nothing. I think Terry McLaurin is an interesting play just because he has been really good, and I do think his talent can kind of overcome some matchups, but this has been a really tough matchup to overcome. And his points, there's such a high percentage of McLaurin's points that come off of touchdowns that it makes him borderline touchdown dependent right now at 6,100. I think there's going to be spots in the not too distant future where I'm really excited to play him. I was excited to play him last week, and he had 100 yards against the Dolphins. But outside of that, a lot of this dude's points are coming from the 6 points in the end zone, and I think this is a extremely tough matchup. To bank on that, we have seen him garbage time his way into not bad fantasy performances. You remember that Chicago Bears defensive game where the Bears basically dominated the whole game, and then McLaurin fell into a touchdown in the second half, and he walked away with 19. You know, if I fade 19 at 6,100, it's not the end of the world, and I'm okay. But he's probably the only Redskin right now that I would even consider, and I don't think he's going to make my player pool at all. So that's my thoughts on game 1. Niners D, Kittle, Tevin Coleman. Game number 2, the Arizona Cardinals at the New York Giants. This one is going to be one of my favorite games of the week for obvious reasons. The Giants have the 3rd highest team total in the NFL, 26.75. They're a 3-point favorite right now. The game total is at 50.5. We've been targeting Cardinal games all year. We've been targeting tight ends against the Cardinals all year, and I think this is a spot where it all comes together to really be a plus for Evan Ingram. By the way, just looking back at that 49ers game, injury-wise, there was nothing too crazy that I had to adjust for here. Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback for the 49ers, listed as out, so maybe less of a vulture there for Tevin Coleman. Nothing else that really affects anything that we talked about. And then on the Redskins side, Vernon Davis out and Josh Norman questionable. So nothing crazy there. And then if we go to the Giants game, Big news from the Giants camp because Saquon Barkley was a full participant in practice this week. He's expected to play. Evan Ingram is expected to play. Sterling Shepard listed as out. So that's basically going to put Golden Tate on the outside, and he's likely going to get covered by the returning Patrick Peterson a lot. So I think that will neutralize Golden Tate and my interest in him. I don't think he's completely off limits though, because he did do fine against the Patriots, 100 yards, but he was the only option offensively for the Giants that game. No Barkley, no Ingram, stuff like that. I think Evan Ingram is the easy shoe-in play here, 6,500. I think DraftKings stopped playing around with these tight end prices. If you look at where Evan Ingram has been priced at, 58, 57, 52, he's at 6,500. And the same in that same breath, George Kittle's up there as well, 67. So we're talking, slot receiver type pricing, but it's apropos, it's appropriate. So Evan Ingram, tight ends against the Arizona Cardinals, man. If you need me to tell you about what tight ends have done against the Cardinals on the Saturday before, you might want to withdraw. But just for the heck of it, 26.2 DraftKings points per game allowed the Cardinals against tight ends. We loved Austin Hooper last week. He absolutely crushed it. They've allowed almost 600 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns on the season to the tight end position, and an 82.1% catch percentage. And I think with Patrick Peterson coming back, it's only going to help funnel more involvement to high usage tight ends, and that's what we're seeing here for Evan Ingram. And then Saquon Barkley, man, he's had some time off. He recovered well. It's a long weekend. They played Thursday Night Football last week. He didn't play, but the team did. So, maybe his O-line's a little bit more fresh. And Saquon Barkley can come back and be a game changer, be that guy that we've seen last season. And because of how these two teams run, these are two of the fastest paced teams in the NFL. We should expect a lot of possessions and a lot of opportunities. And Saquon Barkley's a guy that could come up close to 20 carries and maybe 10 targets. I mean, he could legitimately have 30 touches, and that's something that, you can also expect out of his peer here, David Johnson. So Saquon Barkley, 8,900. I think he's one of the highest floor, highest ceiling type players if we are assuming that he's fully healthy. I think we have to, considering he was a full participant in practice. So give me him. Give me some Evan Ingram. And then, hey, why not take a peek at some Daniel Jones, 6,100 for him. I think there's plenty of meat on the bone. The last 2 weeks were bad matchups for a quarterback. The Patriots defense, arguably the best defense in football. And then the Vikings defense, a really top-notch defense. And then I think week 3 at Tampa, obviously it's the super ceiling. But somewhere in the middle between Tampa and Washington. Washington ended up being a game script where the Giants dominated and protected a lead and only gave up 3 points. I think this game probably has a better shootout potential than that game. So if we can get somewhere in the middle from his Washington performance to his Tampa performance, I think mid-20 fantasy points, absolutely a range of outcomes here. Maybe level up this touchdown to interception ratio a little bit. So I don't mind him at all. Daniel Jones, Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, likely going to be the 3 popular names I extract from the Giants offense. And if we're going to run it back, well, first of all, we're going to look at Kyler Murray. He's the 3rd highest priced quarterback on the slate. We're really, really starting to see him evolve as a player. And the last 2 weeks, he faced 2 of the worst defenses in football, the Atlanta Falcons and the Cincinnati Bengals, and he walked away with appropriate DraftKings points, 31.8 and 25.42. Now, the Giants defense certainly not locked down by any stretch of the imagination, but probably a little bit better than those two. If we go look at points per allowed per game, the Giants are 5th. So actually higher than the Bengals, but of course the Falcons lead the league in points per game. So this is still a top 5 matchup here, and a matchup to drool over. So Kyler Murray, 6,700. You got to go up there and get him, but I definitely like him a lot. I think he's starting to grow as a rookie, starting to get some confidence under him. And the more snaps, the more experience, the more better that he's going to be. And because of the pace of this game, both teams are top 10 in adjusted pace. I think this game. I mean, we could see each quarterback throw the ball 30 plus times. We really could. So give me some Kyler Murray. It's the first look on the Cardinals offense. David Johnson has a Q tag on him, listed as questionable. Coach Cliff Kingsbury said Johnson wouldn't have been healthy enough to play if the game took place Friday instead of Sunday. That's not a great quote. Johnson was a bit more optimistic, noting that he felt good after Friday's limited practice. Remains hopeful to suit up against the Giants, per Darren Urban of the Cardinals' official site. Sounds like a true game time decision. That's kind of what we were dealing with last week, where David Johnson said that he could play, and then we heard Kingsbury question that on Friday, and a lot of people were ready to play the backup. I think you can keep that in mind here. Chase Edmonds last week, by the way, 2 targets, 5 carries. Did end up with a touchdown, so he was actually a fine play anyway. If you played him, 4,700 is priced up a little bit more in case he does have to play. But this being a 1 p.m. game, right at lock, I will certainly have that information likely an hour to 90 minutes before the game even happens, if not more. And maybe it'd be one of those 1 a.m. bombshells by Schefter or Rappaport. So keep an eye on the David Johnson situation. 7,800. He becomes a really risky play if we are concerned about injury. I definitely like my chances at going to play Saquon instead, but certainly don't mind the thought of David Johnson here. If Johnson were to miss, you have to play Chase Edmonds if he's going to be someone who replicates the usage that David Johnson. I'll be honest, there's not much here that says he wouldn't. If you look at what happened in that Cincinnati game, Johnson was a little banged up that game. We saw him get targets, we saw him get snaps, and in relation to his snap count for that game, you got to believe he would be a big part of the offense should David Johnson not be able to go. So 4,700, 15 to 20 fantasy points, certainly a realm of possibility with the potential for more. So normally I don't love opposing running backs. Long term, that's been a negative correlation, but because of how these two teams play, where they involve their running backs a lot in the passing game and they're still fast paced, if you like David Johnson and Saquon to run them at each other, I actually don't think that's the craziest play. But especially if David Johnson was out, you could fit in Chase Edmonds in those Saquon lines. The receiving core for the Cardinals is a little bit more spread out. It's not quite as bad as the 49ers situation, but because they run at a faster pace, you can add up more targets here. So if we go scroll up on the weekly target tab of the RunDFS.com VIP spreadsheet, Larry Fitzgerald averaging 8.7 targets per game, and then Christian Kirk, averaging 9.3 targets per game. So Kirk has been dealing with an injury, and if we go look at the injury report for the Cardinals, Christian Kirk questionable for this one. Limited participant in practice. Have to see if he suits up. If he did suit up, definitely think he's worth a tournament flyer because I don't think a lot of people will play him. But at 5K, as a guy who's averaged the most targets per game on the team, certainly fits the bill that against this Giants secondary, he could sneak one, especially a long one. Past that, your possession receiver bet is likely Larry Fitzgerald, who hasn't really blown the doors off of any game in terms of price per DraftKings points return. Week 1 was that crazy overtime game that ended in a tie, so you could argue that in regulation he probably doesn't break the slate, and then it's just a lot of possession receiving. Maybe there's an argument for touchdown progression, just 2 touchdowns on the season, and he hasn't had a touchdown in his last 3 weeks. At 6,100, if you're happy with a shot at 20, I definitely think you can expect 20 to be a range of outcome because of his targets and because of the matchup. But I certainly don't blame you guys if he doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies. And that's it. Give me David Johnson. Give me Kyler Murray. No one else here that I think I have to jam in from the Excuse me. Took a sip of soda. Been trying out this new soda, by the way. It's called Zevia, 0 calorie soda. Kind of reminds me of Bang, just less caffeine. I'll be honest, so far not a giant fan, but nice and cold, and it's not stacked of sugar. So, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Game stack though, loving that game stack. I'm probably staying away from both defenses, although Daniel Jones has been turning the ball over, and Patrick Peterson is a thing. Maybe if this game was in Arizona, I'd have different thoughts. Speaking of which, just to think out loud, Arizona, an indoor climate controlled situation. New York has been experiencing temperature change. You've been watching the Yankee game. I've been watching the Yankee games. They're all bundled up, wearing body sweaters. Sometimes cold temperatures have a way of locking up some people's bodies, and maybe we see lower scoring. Maybe Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense get out to a slow start here, and this game isn't all that we hope for. Just an idea in the back of our head to watch temperatures as we get into this one. But I'm not overthinking it just yet in mid-October, right? It's one thing in mid-October. It's a whole other thing in mid-December. Let's move on from this game. The Texans at the Colts, a division rivalry matchup. The Texans, of course, have been the beneficiaries of really nice matchups the last couple weeks, and I have been all over the Deshaun Watson train. The train gets a little bit slower here against the Colts, as the Colts defense has been really good, and the Colts team definitely a little bit better than many expected with Andrew Luck not playing. The Texans' implied total this week, 23 right now. It's dropped half a point since it opened, and then the Colts total is 24. So the Colts a slight favorite in this division matchup. You're going to hear a lot of back and forth on T.Y. Hilton here. T.Y. Hilton has a really good history of going off on the Texans, that's for sure. So we're going to go to statmuse.com, T.Y. Hilton, DKP per game log versus the Texans. Let's go last 10 games, right? Maybe it's by game log, excuse me. Here we go. So the last couple games, 13.5, 31.9, 18.5, 4.4. I think he got injured that game. 37.5, 29.5. Essentially what we're seeing is a propensity for T.Y. Hilton to drop 20 plus and even flirt with 30. Let's just say the last 3 of his last 5 games, he's put up 30 points, or 3 of his last 6, 30 points in this matchup. Not much has really changed for the Texans. Their coaching staff hasn't changed. Their cornerbacks haven't really changed. So if you're a fan of BVP in football, it's there for you. T.Y. Hilton comes in at 5,900. That in and of itself is probably a price low enough for a guy like Hilton that would want to attack T.Y. Hilton, by the way. If we go to receiving stats and then sort it by percentage of red zone targets, T.Y. Hilton, Control F, T.Y. Hilton has almost 30% of his team's red zone targets. So there is some touchdown equity to go after. The implied total is putting them at 3 touchdowns and a field goal. There's plenty of reasons to like T.Y. Hilton. If you're not a fan of BVP, I think you want to play him, go for it. I'm not going to talk you off of it. The Colts offense a little bit harder to kind of like figure out and love. Jacoby Brissett in his last couple games, KC only threw the ball 29 times for 11 fantasy points. Prior to that, Oakland ended up being kind of a surprise shootout. Threw the ball 46 times. Don't expect that. 37 times against the Atlanta Falcons. What do we expect his range of outcomes to be? Nonetheless, we haven't seen him exceed 23 fantasy points, so I don't think I'm going to force in a lot of the Colts offense. I will have some T.Y. Hilton on account of his price. If T.Y. Hilton's 7K, 7.5K or something like that here, maybe it's a different story, but that price is probably too low for a guy that leads or is that high in red zone targets. Because if he gets in the end zone on like a 10-yard catch, it's 7, 8 points just right there, and that probably gets you almost halfway to what you need, and he's not going to be blanked, right? The tight end situations for the Colts, that's enough for me to not really kind of flirt with and juggle the the uh, the range of outcomes for Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron and all those cats to be the right play. I think I'm gonna really settle in on Evan Ingram and move on from there. If we look at the injury report for the Colts, nothing huge to impact this offense. Kenny Moore, cornerback, listed as out. Paris Campbell's out as a wide receiver. Nothing crazy that's going to shake up my approach here. And then on the Texans side of things, Jonathan Joseph questionable, Bradley Roby questionable. They were practicing in limited fashion in practice. Obviously, if either one of those guys were to be out or both, that would extremely change my T.Y. Hilton. Maybe like T.Y. Hilton would be a lock at that point, but the fact that they were limited in practice and did practice makes me think that we likely see them play. On the Texans side, the Colts defense against the pass, or really the Colts defense in general, it's kind of been inconsistent. But what we saw against that in that Chiefs game certainly makes you believe, right? On the season, the Colts have given up 762 yards passing. I think we have to remember that may not sound. I guess it doesn't. That doesn't sound. I mean, it's not a lot, right? 762 allowed with just 4 touchdowns. It's top in the league. Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins, the way that the Texans offense runs, like they're gonna pass the ball a whole lot. It's gonna be between those two, and I don't think you can shut them both down. I'm curious to see how the Colts scheme the Texans here. If they were able to, scheme Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs down, do they have something up their sleeve for this Watson-led onslaught for the Texans? And I think we might be surprised to see that they do. But Watson's going to chuck the ball 30 plus times. He's going to run the ball, spread defenses if he has to. He has over 40 yards rushing in the past 2 games. So I certainly am tempted to take a shot on a Fuller or a Hopkins. Hopkins at 7,800 becomes an extremely high risk, high reward type play, and we haven't seen the reward since week 1 in a shootout versus New Orleans on Monday night. Past that, he's had some fine matchups, some premier matchups. Kansas City, Atlanta. The peripheral stats, by the way, are not bad. I mean, 8, 12 targets in his last 2 games. The yardage isn't there. The touchdowns are certainly not there. I think you need 30 at 78 to really feel like you missed out on the right player. Could it be the week he does it? Sure. But I think I'm going to trust in this Colts defense a little bit to not make me force the decision. And then Will Fuller, I know a lot of people will look at last week and just the end score here, 9.4, and be like, the Falcons game was an anomaly. Falcons are that bad, and then he went back down to earth. Will Fuller left 3 touchdowns on the table last week. Literally, should have caught 3 touchdowns, and he didn't. He dropped all those passes. I mean, just the 3 touchdowns alone is another 18 points, and that puts him at 27, not to mention the receptions, the yardage, and all that. So, if we think that defenses continue to focus on DeAndre Hopkins first, and they should, I think Will Fuller is worth another look to go back to. It's just a matter of him actually catching some football. So 6,200, I think there's enough room on the bone for him. Wouldn't be a primary play at all. Maybe a tier 3 type guy for me this week. But those are the names that are sticking out. I probably am not going to mess with the running backs on either side. Let's go look at yardage allowed. Colts run defense has allowed just 431 rushing yards. The Texans are right below the Colts. We'll say that the Colts have allowed, just 2 touchdowns. So both of them just a pair of touchdowns. The Texans have been more susceptible to the pass-catching running backs. I do think a lot of that could be schedule influenced. If you look at some of their matchups here, I mean, KC, they had I think Darren Williams caught a touchdown on them. Atlanta, of course, using Devontae Freeman. Carolina, of course, using Christian McCaffrey. The Chargers, of course, using Austin Eckler that week. The Jaguars using Leonard Fournette, and New Orleans using Alvin Kamara. I mean, they have faced some of the highest usage pass catching running backs. So I do think that there's a case to be made that stat might have a little bit of fluff in it just due to strength of schedule. But Marlon Mack, 6K, I don't think he's a target whore by any stretch of the imagination. But if you thought that maybe him or Hines or somebody would sneak in a route or two that they could ship to the house, go for it. But for the most part, I'm not going to go too crazy with this game. I've been all over Watson the last couple weeks. I think this game kind of trends down a little bit, but I will have some Hilton and some Fuller, and that's probably it. If you wanted to take a shot on a defense here, I don't think the Colts is crazy. Let's look at O-line DVOA, compliments of Football Outsiders. The Texans have gotten a little bit better. They've allowed 14 sacks on the season. That's a 5.4% adjusted sack rate. And then DVOA for the defense. Indianapolis. I guess Indy's not stacking on. They've only got 14 sacks. All right. Felt like the first couple weeks we saw Watson getting hit a little bit more. So, I'd probably just have some Fuller and some T.Y. Hilton from that game. Moving on, Oakland at Green Bay. This one probably sounds more appealing at first, and then when you start peeling back the onion layers, you're starting to wonder what's going on with this Green Bay team. Green Bay right now, a 4.5-point favorite. They were 6.5-point favorites, so the line on that has moved a little bit. And I do think that's going to be a product of Devontae Adams being out. 25.5 is the Packers' implied total right now. The Raiders' implied total at 21. So both teams spotted 3 touchdowns. Starting with the Green Bay side, man, just looking at the injury report alone, there's a lot of question marks about who does what. Like, I want to play some Aaron Rodgers finally in a matchup I love that's on the main slate. But man, like, what are we working with here? Geronimo Allison, concussion, doubtful for this game. Devontae Adams, toe, listed as out. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling, ankle, questionable. If you asked me to name 4 receivers on the Packers, I think I could only give you 3, and it's those 3. I'm kidding, of course, Kumaro and whatnot. But this, if Aaron Rodgers is going to be a play against this Raiders defense, he's going to do it with a skeleton crew, potentially some practice squad guys. So because of that, like, where do we start? Well, because of that, I do think there is potential value coming in this Green Bay receiving core, because people that do play are going to be really doggone cheap. And on DraftKings, we've got Kumaro, we got Shepard, and we got Lazard. Lazard, of course, in that last game, 4 for 5 as all the flies started dropping. I think a lot of people will be chasing him, and I got no reason to be against it. He's the guy that I think a lot of people will look towards. It kind of reminds me of the Byron Pringle situation where everyone saw him shine in prime time, and then you go after him the next week and not much happens. But it's not a bad matchup. Like, I'll take it. I think if he is my wide receiver 3 and it makes sense, I'm cool with punting wide receiver 3 if my running backs are stacked, right? Looking at the target tree, weekly targets, so we go to Green Bay. We have to fill a lot. Devontae Adams leads the team in targets per game. Of course, hasn't played the last 2 weeks. Behind him, MVS, 5.7 targets per game. Geronimo Allison, 4 targets a game. Like, you taking all those guys out, do we trust Jimmy Graham to step up? Jimmy Graham without Devontae Adams has had a hype train behind him the last 2 weeks, but really hasn't come through. I think we start looking at. I think you have to look at Kumaro and Lazard, and then maybe you just look at them in general, just trying to trust the running backs a little bit more. And I think that's where I start. Jamal Williams could just be a receiver here, right? 5 targets against Detroit. Had a big game that game, by the way. 26 fantasy points. I don't mind using him conservatively in tournaments. Aaron Jones, of course, the week before in Dallas, 8 targets. He had plenty of targets last week, 7 targets his last 3 games. Do we start using him as kind of a pass catching threat to fill up some of those Aaron Rodgers throws? I think it's very possible, very plausible. So I think Green Bay, even though I was excited to play them for once at home against the defense that I don't mind attacking, give me more questions than answers. So let me know what you guys are doing with Green Bay here. I definitely think Lazar's somebody I'm gonna to punt with. And I don't know that we can just burn running back spots here, man. I think Saquon is gonna be a guy I'm really trying to get to. Leonard Fournette against the Bengals is gonna be somebody you're gonna want. Todd Gurley maybe with Malcolm Brown. We'll get to all that, but man, I don't know if I'm able to burn a running back or a flex spot here, taking a gamble on one of these running backs to be the guy to fill up some targets for the Packers here. On the Oakland side, Josh Jacobs becomes interesting. 26 carries against the Bears, 32 fantasy points. I mean, the Bears is the Bears, right? I will say that game was in London. Weird stuff happens in London. But defense versus position, most rushing yards allowed. We know that the Packers' run D is not great. 644 yards allowed, 7 rushing touchdowns allowed. So you could certainly make a case for Josh Jacobs if you felt this is going to be a neutral game script for him to do well in. Don't mind that take at all. And then, of course, tight end Darren Waller, 4,700. It's going to give you a 2K savings over his counterparts like Evan Ingram and George Kittle. His targets the last 2 weeks haven't been as much as what we saw the first couple weeks of the season, but the matchup's a little bit worse. The Bears defense, obviously, against the pass, really, really tough. And then the Colts defense, we're learning pretty good. He still went 7 for 8 in that game. So if you spot him a touchdown here, and then you're expecting 6 to 9 targets, which I think is fair, 4,700. I can take the gamble on that without feeling any remorse. I will say that we know that Tyrell Williams is out, right? We got that information yesterday, so we go to the injury report just to verify that. Wide receiver Tyrell Williams listed as out, and then Dwayne Harris listed as questionable for a giant great. So I mean, without Tyrell Williams again, I think we can start looking at some of these Oakland receivers if we're really trying to stretch some cheapies. But I'm just basically looking at Jacobs and Waller if I have to get there. Could we play either defense? I'm probably not. All right, Minnesota, and the Detroit Lions. This game probably has one of the lower totals, right? Yep, we got ourselves a 43.5 live total. The Lions have an implied total of 20.75. They're a 2-point dog. The Vikings, 22.75. 2-point favorite. So low total, we probably expect that out of these two teams. Run slow. A good defense in the Vikings. And I would probably say a better defense than people think for the Lions. I think Matt Patricia probably has a better defense than offense when it comes to his mind. Stephon Diggs had a breakout game last week. Kind of expected that as a range outcome against the Philadelphia team that funnels long passes, and that's what we saw with Stephon Diggs. Had a 62-yarder, had 3 touchdowns. Maybe 46 was not something I pegged, but he's certainly somebody we wrote up and explored just based on how the team funnels the pass. And a run-heavy team like the Vikings would have to pass the ball if that Eagles front seven could give Dalvin Cook some fits. The Vikings defense is going to be good enough that I don't go I probably don't touch this game in my player pool, if I'm being honest. Kenny Galladay would probably be the first and only line that I would look at. He's muscled his way to 20 plus fantasy points 3 of the 5 games he's played this season. He seems like he's Matthew Stafford's favorite target. If I had to go somewhere, maybe I'm looking at him. He's pretty cheap for what his potential is. And then on the Vikings side, I think Dalvin Cook maybe lurks lower owned than he should be. I think this is a this is not my favorite spot for him, but I do think this is a little bit better of a matchup than the Eagles. The Eagles, of course, went into that game, I believe, as the number one running defense, and right now they're third best in the league, whereas the Lions are much more closer to league average, giving up 30.7 points per game. Yikes. So I think Dalvin Cook is in a bounce back spot, right? Maybe they just exchange squeaky wheel situations. The Lions actually giving up the third most fantasy points a game to the running back situation. A lot of touchdowns there, a lot of passing touchdowns as well, or a couple passing touchdowns as well. So maybe Dalvin Cook comes back into the conversation. People forget about him. You can kind of replicate the environment from his home crowd or from his home stadium here. It's a dome game in Detroit. We've seen him in all but 2 games pretty much put up 30 fantasy points. The games that he didn't, at the Chicago Bears, Soldier Field, and Philadelphia Eagles. And if we go back to that running back chart, the Eagles, the 3rd fewest rushing yards. The Bears, the 5th fewest. If we go to points per game allowed, the Eagles, 4th lowest points per game. And I think after last week, the Bears kind of fell a little bit. But I think we should assume that Josh Jacobs' performance was a little bit more anomalic. So Dalvin Cook and not top 5 matchups has basically given us 30 points per game. This is not a top 5 matchup. So AK for Dalvin Cook, I think he becomes a really fun tournament play that I don't mind going to. I'm probably going to not go wild with the receiving cores here. Thielen at 7K. He did get 8 targets last week. Did get a touchdown last week. I don't know. Last week, 38 points is probably not what they're scoring here. It's just probably not. Give him some Cook. Depending on how deep I make my player pool, I might have a couple of 2%, 3% Thielen Diggs. Just throw them in the pool and see what happens. But I don't think it's a spot that I love the target overall. Let me go look at the wide receiver chart one more time, just to feel better about myself. Where the Lions and the Vikings at? Vikings are a little bit more league average in terms of DraftKings points per game allowed, and the Lions are a little bit above them. So could just be a mediocre, medium scoring game, in which case I think Dalvin Cook is the guy that people forget here. So give me that. Either defense I think you could take a shot on. Nothing that's giving me the warm and fuzzies. Jacksonville at Cincinnati. This game seems really simple to break down. Jacksonville did just trade away Jalen Ramsey, but it's not like they've been playing with him the last couple weeks anyway. Without him, their defense had given up 13 points to the Saints, 28 to the Christian McCaffrey-led Carolina Panthers, and then, of course, 24 to the Denver Broncos. The passing yards allowed, though, not that crazy. Rushing yards were wild. CMC did a lot of that. Total yardage allowed, probably up there. Yeah, over 340 or 320 total yards allowed in the last 4 games. So there's definitely an impact there. The Bengals, however, are, until they get healthy, probably one of the worst teams in football. And I don't think we're stepping out on a limb there. Let's go look at the injury report for the Bengals. It's pretty deep. Cornerback situations are rough. Kirkpatrick out. William Jackson out. I think is AJ Green out? Yeah, AJ Green's still listed as out. Tyler Boyd is back. to maybe soak up some of those targets on Tate. Not back. Tyler Boyd is there to soak up some of the targets on Tate there. So I think if your game script here is that the Bengals play from behind, I think Tyler Boyd and on Tate can soak up some of those garbage time targets. The Jaguars have an implied total of 23.75 total points. The Bengals 19.75. Bengals are so bad. Let's start with the Jags. So let's just break down Jags here. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place. Gardner Minshew at 5,400. 5 fantasy points last week against the Saints. A little bit all over the road the last 3 weeks. A wide range of outcomes. 5, 16, 27. I think 25-ish here is very possible, but this does scream and feel like a Leonard Fournette game from the word go. 7K for Fournette, 20-plus rushing attempts in 3 straight with targets to boot and a high percentage of catch rate on those targets. 17, 26, 29. We do know that the Bengals are bad, and especially bad against the run because teams have the ability to just run the football at will. The Bengals are allowing the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So I think Leonard Fournette is essentially a no-brainer here. And then, of course, if we wanted to supplement our Jaguar shares, DJ Shark, easily somebody we can look at. 7, 11, 8 targets. He has been kind of Minshew's go-to guy. Especially in the end zone. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season. Could be a week that Shark gets back on the touchdown side of things. Westbrook dealing with a shoulder injury. I think we just looked at the injury report, right? I think he'll play. Matter of fact, he's questionable. I think if he did play, it might be one of those situations where they don't have to push it just because it's the Bengals. So even more reason for me to kind of like DJ Chark here. So give me Chark, give me Leonard Fournette. And if I played some Minshew, I would absolutely have to. It would just have to be either hoping it was a pass catching touchdown to Fournette or a couple of shots at Chark. I think I'm basically just gonna hang my hat on Leonard Fournette and hope for the best. Now, with that said, Bengals at home. Do we think they can be competitive here? I'm not holding my breath for it, but I think this Jaguars defense is something that we can not run from. I don't want to say run to, especially with an Andy Dalton-led offense, but the targets should be there for Tyler Boyd. Last week was a little rough. It was a tough matchup. Marlon Humphreys does a great job of shutting down number ones, and then Auden Tate was the guy that kind of slipped through there to be a solid fantasy play, right? He had 14 fantasy points. So I think if you're playing Tate or Boyd, you're just kind of banking on garbage time being there. I think this Bengals team is getting real close to hitting the panic button. And then who knows if A.J. Green gets on the trade block and they just really blow it up. But I'm really liking Leonard Fournette. I think he's the easiest play of the game and probably of the slate. And then I'm not a big proponent of playing road defenses, but 3,500 for the Jags. I know that they don't have Jalen Ramsey, but the Jags defense still in this matchup gives me some type of upside, right? If we go to the adjusted sack rate allowed, the Cincinnati Bengals have a 13.6% adjusted sack rate. They've given up 25 sacks. It's the second most in the NFL, and they're ranked 31st out of 32 teams in O-line in terms of adjusted sack rate allowed. The defensive line DVOA shows that the Jaguars are ranked 23rd in getting sacks, so 5.8% adjusted sack rate. Excuse me, that's not the Jags. Let me sort this from. Here we go. Jaguars are 12th, so 8.1% adjusted sack rate, which is top half in the league. So I think there's enough meat on the bone there. If you put a top half of the league defensive line against a bottom 2 offensive line for a team that's likely going to play from behind and have to throw the ball a little bit more, there's a lot of sack opportunities on Andy Dalton and maybe some scoop and score opportunities. So Jaguars at 3,500 certainly going to be in my player pool as a defense. I would rather them be at home, but I'm fine. I'm fine going there. No Dalton for me. No Bengals D for me. Miami at Buffalo. Next game on the docket. We go to the Vegas totals. The Buffalo Bills are tied for the highest team total on the entire slate. Soon as I saw this game without even seeing the totals, I was excited to play the Bills. Bills are a massive 16.5 point favorites. I don't know that many people ever expected to see the Bills a 16.5 point favorite in the last couple seasons. But here we are. Scary time, right? Where do we start with the Bills, man? I think obviously a 16.5 point favorite makes you want to look at the running back at home, protect the lead. Could Devin Singletary be in a position to be great? He practiced fully on Friday, third straight day. He hasn't played in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Is it 4 weeks? Maybe 5 weeks. In that last appearance, 6 carries against the Giants. In the game before that, 4 carries against the Jets. Frank Gore is there. We've seen Gore become an option, but never really give us a chance at 20-plus fantasy points. Revenge. 14 carries for him last week, 8.9 fantasy points on 4.3 yards per carry. I mean, look at these yards per carry for old Frank Gore. 4.3, 6.4, 5.4. Give him a couple touchdowns. Maybe he's sneaking in there. I don't feel like any of these running backs make you feel like they have upside. Kind of feels like, last week we saw a lot of people on Adrian Peterson. He did break 100 yards. Maybe one of these guys do it. I think I'm really interested in seeing what Josh Allen can do for me. 6,500. This guy could run the ball himself for 50 of 60 of those yards. We haven't seen him have a big rushing game in a while, but he's been up against, the last 2 weeks at least, some tough matchups. Tennessee Titans defense. That team just tends to slow games down. And then, of course, the Patriots defense is really rough. We've seen this guy have 70, 80 yards rushing before. So I do think this is one of those chances where I'm curious to get back on board with him. I will say I'm not happy that DraftKings decided to jack his price all the way to 6,500 when he really hasn't shown a ceiling for 65. Maybe this stifles his ownership a little bit. And we don't see him, 20% owned or 15% owned or whatever, because of 6,500. I mean, you essentially need to be a top 3-4 scoring quarterback if you get played there. But he's in play for me. If we're going to handcuff him, of course we're going to handcuff him to John Brown. 5,500 for Mr. Brown. 5'11", 5'8" targets his last 4 games. He's another guy that only has shown upside in week 1. That was against the Jets. And what we've learned is that John Brown and John Brown is going to be the favored target for the Bills here to go deep for anything. We know that the Dolphins defense is in shambles. Their secondary, everything's in shambles. So 5,500 for John Brown. If I can get a shot at 10 targets and maybe get in the end zone, I'll take a chance. I think he's given us a strong enough floor in cash at this price point where we can take a shot on the upside. If he did give us 15 or less in tournaments, I'm not sure that's going to make a dent in much. But you got to like him being tied for the highest team total. And that sets up really, really, really well for him at home here in Buffalo. No Dolphins for me. The tight end situation, Dawson Knox is a little curious. I'm a little curious with him. 5, 3, 4 targets the last couple weeks. Did show us touchdown propensity against the Bengals, a similarly ranked defense to the Dolphins. But for the most part, you can give me Allen, you can give me John Brown. You could make some cases for some of these secondary plays. I think we really just want to figure out the running back situation, and it seems like it's going to be a timeshare at best. So let me know if you guys got any secret nuggets on this Buffalo Bills situation to maybe make me feel a little bit better about Singletary or Frank Gore. It's kind of wild that Singletary's higher priced than Frank Gore, considering their game logs lately. But this could certainly be one of those matchups where the Bills let Singletary run and just to see what they got. And they haven't been able to do that for much of the year. Rams at the Falcons, probably a game of the week candidate. All but 3 games, by the way, lock at 1, and this is one of them. This game total currently at 54.5. Another swig of the Zevia. So this should be our highest scoring game. The Rams offense versus the Falcons offense, and more particularly the Rams defense versus the Falcons defense. It's been really rough for both teams. The Falcons are looking like they're at the point of no return. I've even talked about some of their defensive players being on the trade block. The Rams went to the trade block and made some moves, trading away Marcus Peters and trading for Jalen Ramsey. So because of that little information, we might be able to funnel some work from the Falcons away from Julio Jones, assuming that he has a date with Jalen Ramsey, and focus on maybe the secondary receiving options like Calvin Ridley and even Austin Hooper. Looking at the Rams injury report, Jalen Ramsey, full participation in practice. It's a miracle. It's a miracle, man. 2 weeks ago, we're worried about his back. The agents are tweeting about his back, and bam, now he's fully ready to go. Malcolm Brown listed as doubtful. This one's pretty big. So let's go look at Todd Gurley first and foremost and wonder, is this the Gurley week? $6,400 for Todd Gurley. He's been playing 70% of snaps in a lot of games. You look at what he did in week 5 against Seattle, 15 carries, 5 targets, 19 fantasy points. He's given us 15 or more in 3 of his last 4, with that one being against the Browns. No Malcolm Brown here. I feel like the vulture's gone. 6,400 against the Falcons. We're in it, right? I gotta love it. I think right now, just talking through 6 games before this, I'm trying to get Saquon, I'm trying to get Leonard Fournette, and now I'm trying to get Todd Gurley. Points per game to the running back situation, to the running back position. The Falcons are right about league average, 25.4 DraftKings points per game. They've given up 592 yards rushing, 5 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. This should be a good spot for Gurley to get back right, and even if he doesn't, $6K, man. I mean, this is a guy we used to easily pay $8+K for. So, Todd Gurley certainly makes my player pool. I'm not excited that he's only averaged 3 yards a carry the last couple games, but if we kind of expand our horizons a little bit, Tampa Bay has been one of the better run defenses. Just looking at it, the best run defense on the season right now belongs to Tampa Bay and Seattle. Seattle's been top 10. Cleveland, the Browns are, maybe that's a little bit of an anomaly that we're a little bit scared of. Browns have been a bottom 5 matchup for running backs. You would love to see him average closer to 4 yards per carry like he did against Carolina or New Orleans. But I'm there, man. I think the usage should be there, and I don't think there should be any excuses here. So give me some Todd Gurley with Malcolm Brown being doubtful. Looking elsewhere on this Rams offense, Cooper Kupp, 7,400. He has risen to the top to be the most expensive receiver on this team. 5.7 points against the 49ers. I was off of him in that game. I think we are all believers in the 49ers defense now. They're really good. But before that, it was a cornucopia of fantasy points for much of the season. 29, 29, 36, 20. Slot receivers have been terrorizing the Atlanta Falcons. It's a big spot for Kupp. If I fall in line with playing the Lazard kid from Green Bay, I think he's gonna be one of those keys that unlocks Cooper Kupp for me here. I gotta balance my love for Kupp and Gurley together, but I don't even think they're in negative correlation considering their price points. I mean, think about when Gurley was 7-4 and Cup was 6K. So I don't mind that at all. And then past Cooper Cup, you could absolutely make, hey, this could be the weak cases for Robert Woods, for Brandon Cooks. Woods 4, 9, 15 targets his last couple weeks. And then, of course, Brandon Cooks, we have not seen him really bust out for a huge week yet. Lots of question marks around Jared Goff and his accuracy, but his safety blanket has been Cooper Kupp, so he's the guy that we have to keep banking on. So give me Gurley, give me Cooper Kupp. I think I should be higher on Jared Goff than what my gut has me at. These two teams, if we're looking at pass attempt leaders, matter of fact, let me go to passing stats. If we look at pass attempt leaders, Matt Ryan and Jared Goff lead the league in pass attempts. So there should be a lot of throws in this game if it lives up to his total. It's hard to like playing Jared Goff right now. It's been a tough couple weeks for him. 2, 21, 27. And I guess even in his bad games, you think about throwing 59% against Seattle. For him to still walk away with 20 plus fantasy points is something. He's cheaper than Josh Allen. Tampa Bay, 66% completion rate, 68 attempts. That's actually insane. It's actually insane. They throw the ball a lot. So it doesn't have to be super efficient against this defense. If you're going to throw the ball a lot and walk away with 3 touchdowns, 6,200, I guess you have to be in my pool. So we handcuff him to Cooper Kupp a little bit here and there. And we go forward with it. On the Falcons side, so I think Julio Jones is a receiver that could be matchup proof if he wanted to be. I don't think him and Jalen Ramsey have ever linked up. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. Put up 21 fantasy points last week. I'm willing to say that at 8K, Jalen Ramsey should be enough of a headache for me to be able to not jam in Julio Jones. And if I was looking for secondary receiver plays, Calvin Ridley at 5,300 should see a little bit more looks his way. 14, 19 fantasy points for him in the last 2 weeks. Pair of touchdown. You can make a case for Mohamed Sanu, who last week was his first week where he didn't give you double-digit fantasy points in the last 4 weeks. And then, of course, we can keep on keeping on this Austin Hooper train. Hooper, massive weeks, has been the best fantasy tight end, I believe, this season. So 28, 13, 25, 24 in his last couple weeks. So if we can put the governor on the engine of Julio Jones, I think we start looking elsewhere on this offense in Hooper, in Calvin Ridley, and then maybe, just maybe, Devontae Freeman is starting to break through. Big week last week, 88 rushing yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 26 fantasy points. The touchdowns is what really put him over the top. He has had 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. But I think if we look at some of these games that are a little bit more neutral, or even games that he played from behind, had some targets there. He's had as much as 9 targets against Tennessee. I think 5 targets, a little bit more reasonable range of outcome in this one. But at 5,400, you could see him as a guy in this total being a beneficiary of a touchdown or 2 in a game script if you look at a range of outcome of game scripts. Then, of course, Matt Ryan. If you handcuff him to maybe a Calvin Ridley or an Austin Hooper or something like that, 33, 35 fantasy points this last 2 games. This guy has been giving you, for as much as the Falcons have struggled in a real-life sense, this guy's been one of the highest floor fantasy quarterbacks that you guys can play. So I don't mind Matt Ryan at all. They chuck the ball a lot. You handcuff them, you get the right touchdowns, you get the Ridleys, you get the Hoopers. And I'm in. So I think this game and the Giants and Cardinals game on paper kind of scream as the 2 most game stackable high total games for me. And then we start looking at the 3 afternoon games for maybe some late night hammer opportunities. Starting with the Chargers at the Titans. Man, Titans games have been a full-on fade for me. If you guys have been reading my game notes in the VIP spreadsheets, I just basically say, it's a Titans game. Not going to touch it. The Titans are starting Tannehill this week, right? It's a different quarterback this week. So maybe a sign, maybe a message to Mariota, kind of a, hey, man, get better. With that in mind, I'm still not excited to target this game. Maybe I'm sleeping on, I don't know, maybe a Keenan Allen breaks through for one of those 15 target games, but man, oh man, this is ugly. 21.5 is our implied total for the Titans. They are a 2-point favorites. 19.5 is our implied total for the Chargers. Melvin Gordon has essentially taken over the I guess the reps here for Eckler. I mean, 2 weeks ago Eckler had a million targets, right? 16 targets against the Denver Broncos. Last week, 5 carries, 4 targets, surrenders the volume to Melvin Gordon. So I don't know what to make of that. I'm probably just staying away from both of those guys in this situation. Keenan Allen is probably the only constant, and even he has seen a drastic decrease in targets the last couple of weeks. Miami, of course, was a blowout. Denver, maybe Chris Harris Jr. And that uh, receiving defense or the passing defense for the Broncos was a problem. But the volume, we expect the volume to be higher. That said, you could argue his price is dripped or dipped low enough that we can go out there and take advantage of it. Hunter Henry came back for the Chargers, 9 targets last week against Pittsburgh. We expected Hunter Henry to be a thing as the successor to Antonio Gates, and of course he's been dealing with injuries last year and then a week one this year. Last week could have been a sign. He had 2 touchdowns, could be the red zone guy, 100 yards flat. 4K for him. Maybe we look his way. Early in the season, the Titans did surrender a lot of touchdowns to the tight end position. I have not been paying a whole lot of attention to the Titans since then, but they have allowed the third most touchdowns in the league at just 4. Pretty average elsewhere in terms of points per game and total yardage. So maybe we look at Hunter Henry as a volume play. But it's hard to love anything from the Charger side, and really hard to love anything from the Titan side. Tannehill's 4,800. Not really excited to play that. Not really excited to go after any of these receivers. So this game's likely going to be a full-fledged fade for me. 10 games, man. I can't play every game. This one seems like the one I'm going to stay away from. Baltimore at Seattle. Seattle at home. Just Seattle in general. I think Russell Wilson constantly gets overlooked and under-owned. Last week was another scenario. I wrote it up on my game notes, man. This guy is a freak. He's probably going to be the MVP, especially now that Patrick Mahomes is going to miss some time with an injury. So if Russell Wilson stays healthy, he's probably the MVP of the NFL. 3 touchdowns last week, 1 rushing. Back-to-back weeks of 28, 29 fantasy points. At home this season, we've seen him drop 44 in his, against the Saints, 29 against the Rams, and of course week 1 the Bengals, 16 points in a game that maybe we look at now as a little bit more of an anomaly. So if we game script this game to be neutral or stay close, and I think we should, the Seahawks have an implied total of 26. That's the third most on the slate, and the Ravens are at 23. Another sip of that soda. 0 interceptions for Russell Wilson, by the way. Dude's been a beast. Lamar Jackson in that same game last week rushed for 152 yards. This guy gives you an extremely high floor due to his rushing alone. Probably start the game in your head with 6 points just based on Lamar Jackson rushing the ball. So I do think this game will be something that we can attack from a fantasy standpoint. And maybe not forget about it as we load up on some of these early games. And both of those quarterbacks are certainly in my pool, and I think both of those quarterbacks are certainly guys that we could play naked by themselves. We don't necessarily have to handcuff either one of them to players. But if we were looking on the Baltimore side, look out for Marquise Brown's status going into this game. He missed last week. He's questionable for this one. He missed practice all week. Should he miss, Mark Andrews probably flush to the top regardless as the top target for Lamar Jackson. He's almost 5K on DraftKings, 8-7 targets. He hasn't had less than 7 targets in a game this season. So you might get a little blurry when you look at his snap counts and whatever, but he has been the target guy. And even with that in mind, since the first 2 weeks, he hasn't really broken a slate, which kind of adds on to my thought that you can maybe play, Lamar Jackson naked and not feel um, too upset. The Seahawks, though, fourth most fantasy points allowed per game to the tight end position, 400 plus yards receiving allowed, 3 touchdowns on the season. So it's a top four matchup in terms of yardage, in terms of points per game, and it's a top four matchup in yardage allowed. So Mark Andrews could be in a sneaky good spot here at a much better price than the chalkier Kittle and Evan Ingram. So I don't mind a Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews handcuff. I'll be writing that down. And then, is there anyone that we should be specifically targeting from the Seahawks to handcuff Russell Wilson to? So let's go look at the weekly targets for Seattle. 6.8 targets per game for Tyler Lockett, and that's it, man. It gets really, really spread out. So maybe Tyler Lockett, Marlon Humphreys. I almost said Marshawn Lattimore. Marlon Humphreys has been a really good corner for the Ravens, and they're picking up Marcus Peters. So maybe the secondary is going to tighten up a little bit, and it's going to be really on Russell Wilson to get things going. And if it means rushing and finding obscure third string tight ends to throw touchdowns to, then we'll just play Russell Wilson naked. We got one game left to talk about. Before that, take a pause for the cause. If you guys want to interact with me on Twitter, twitter.com/Gundackersports. That's the way to do it. And then, of course, if you guys want to hang out with me tonight after the Yankee game, hopefully I'll be happy because the Yankees win, right? But I could be sad. We'll have the candle burn in the RunDFS.com NFL VIP section. You open up the Discord app, you'll find me in the football voice chat. And then we can talk some plays, man. It's a lot of hanging out, relaxing with the boys, talking some sports, and then carving up our player pool as we get there. And then, of course, I will have my game notes set up, just kind of loose thoughts on each game, guys I like from each game, and then I will have my player pool set up, my tier 1s, my 2s, 3s, and 4s, and then, of course, my favorite GPP group. So if you guys kind of want to see where I end up, you're more than welcome to do so. All you got to do is have a VIP subscription at RunDFS.com, week passes, 2-week passes, month passes, and, of course, the MVP package. All up there right now. And we'd be glad to have you, man. If you guys get in that VIP, there's still a couple days before I have to go 24/7, feet to the ground running with NBA. But if you guys got like strategy questions, contest selection questions, some loose coaching, hit me up, man. I don't mind helping you out. Last game, Saints at the Bears. Bears coming off a weird game in London. Between you and me, I think that was an anomaly. I think London is a backwards. I don't think London is a backwards town, but I think when games go to London, backwards stuff happens. And Mike Evans, for instance, last week had like 1 million targets and actually had a good game against James Bradbury for once, right? Saints situation is a little sticky on the injury report. Pull up their injury report from the NFL injuries tab. Jared Cook out, Alvin Kamara out. Those are big ones. That's going to open up some consideration for Latavius Murray. I don't think Murray's like an extreme value, right? It's not like he was 3,700 here like he was last week or the week before or the week before. For some reason, DraftKings was just like, you know what? Against the Bears, we should make you 5.1K. He should lead the Saints here in running back work. What does that mean? Could it mean 15 carries? And could it mean 8 targets? It could. Are these quality touches against the Bears defense in Chicago? Probably not. The Bears have had time to prepare here, game plan for Teddy Bridgewater. And, of course, we give them a little bit of a lift here without Alvin Kamara. So I think defensively, they focus on shutting down Michael Thomas, who's 7,900. He's had 12, 13 targets this last couple weeks. I think the Bears defense becomes a play, or do. At 3K, I think they're awfully cheap for what we know that they can put up in terms of fantasy points. 17-21 in their last two games in America, and they're at home. So, really good spot for them. If we look at the implied total, Saints have the third lowest implied total on the week, right above the Redskins and the Dolphins. So, could be a rough week for them. The Bears not too much higher in terms of implied points to be scored. 20 and a half. So Vegas kind of calling for a low scoring game here. Do we love anything in particular on the Bears side of things? I think Allen Robinson at 5,500 still has a case. I do think we can say that Marshawn Lattimore has really stepped up his game in deep contrast to the first couple weeks of the season where he was kind of getting torched. We saw A-Rob in the London game drop 28 fantasy points against Oakland. I think we can probably back that up a little bit here, especially if the Bears get their quarterback back. Mitch Trubisky listed as questionable, but I think they'll probably stick with what they got. I don't really have much from this game offensively. I don't think I'm going to be running to play Montgomery. I think Latavius Murray's the biggest question mark. Is 5,100 leave us enough room for upside? Is 25 fantasy points a range of outcome for him here, and do we have to go there? You know what I'm saying? That's kind of the questions we have to ask ourselves, and I think I'm okay staying away from that. So, give me some Bears defense for sure, and then I'm probably not going to go crazy with Saints offense, third fewest implied total on the week. So that's our 10-game slate. I think you can make a case to just play early only this week. I think the bulk of my player pool will be the only, with maybe some scattered touches from the Seattle game. And if that's the case, then you just get your money quicker at 3 p.m. I don't know. You guys want to make a lineup or something? Let's see. The guys that I really want this week: Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, and then I'm thinking Todd Gurley as the flex guy for now at 6,400, unless something else happens. I think I'm going to go Todd Gurley here. Tight end, Evan Ingram. We're going to play tight ends against the Cardinals as long as we live. Defense, I did like the Bears at 3K. Is there anybody cheaper? Nothing. Dolphins at 15. Yeah, no. So I guess the Bears. I guess we can go with the Bears. I do like the Jaguars though. I like their adjusted sack. So let's just do that. Jaguars here. And I guess if we wanted to go Lazard, the Lazard man is our 3K punt. We go there. I don't think we're going to be able to get Cooper Kupp and still make a lineup. Nope. So we're going to have to make some strong decisions here. I think we can consider Evan Ingram as a guy to cut at 6,500. But those are all guys that I'm really think, other than Lazard, those are going to be all guys that I really think I'm going to have a high exposure to in my lineups this week. So that is a first look, late look at this NFL slate. If you guys caught me slipping on anything, if I misprojected somebody playing in or out, let me know in the comments below. Next week, man, it's about to go down. So I'm going to have to... I'm going to try and prioritize... Or not prioritize... To figure out my prioritization of the NFL content. Between me and you, I think the NBA content is going to take a very high priority because it is much more highly consumed. Especially what I'm known for is that the NBA content and those videos are going to get thousands of views. So I don't know where I could fit in a guaranteed NFL stuff. So I think these videos right here are the easiest for me to do because I just turn on a microphone and just start talking and thinking out loud. And I think, you know, the core of you guys that do watch for the football content seem to be okay with that. So I might try and do that. Do you guys prefer these videos earlier in the week or later in the week? Because when we do stuff on Monday and Tuesday, a lot of what we say can just be air by the time Saturday hits because of news and information and stuff like that. So do you guys prefer the late looks in the end of the week? If so, I'll try and maybe keep that a thing. Because I don't want to completely not do NFL content because I do appreciate those of you that are here for the NFL. I'm just trying to be real with y'all. You know what I'm saying? It's about to be a busy, busy, busy time of year. So let me know how you guys prefer. I did put up a poll asking how you guys prefer the content, where you like the positional videos or the full breakdowns. The full breakdowns actually won the poll, but it was closer than I thought it would be. But now I'm asking when you like your videos. So if I can get a gauge on when you guys like your stuff, try to fit that into my schedule for the NBA content season. We'll do our best to make it happen, man. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to the channel. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, turn that notifications bell on, and I guess next week we'll crank back up the PayPal giveaways in the comments. We haven't really done a lot of content this week, but next week with the NBA back and maybe some NFL here, we'll try and get that going, man. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, listening to me ramble about football. I will be in the RunDFS.com VIP Discord tonight, talking my picks and plays. We'll have the NFL spreadsheet all juiced up, ready to go, man. I am excited for Week 7. I'm excited for baseball tonight, and I'm just excited for NBA to be here. It is a wonderful time of year. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Good luck. God bless. Go win some money.